everyone, and welcome to What's Wrong with the Podcast. We hope you're all safe and well. Today, we are delighted to be talking to Dee Lawrence. Dee used her skills from 25 years in marketing and advertising to promote and grow Proyecto Mirador, a 13-year family effort to reduce smoke from indoor cookfires in Honduras. She helped create a project with social benefits that could also, with considerable science and third-party verification, cut emissions of carbon dioxide. As the issue of climate change became big news and a desire to take action grew, it sparked an idea between Dee and her husband Richard. They wanted to make it possible for people to actually buy tons of verified emissions reductions that fight climate change. That is how Cool Effect was born. Cool Effect makes it easy for businesses and individuals to purchase from a transparent and trustworthy source the highest quality carbon offsets that fight climate change and provide social benefits to foster business sustainability goals. Hi, Dee.
Hi, happy Earth Day, everybody.
Happy Earth Day. Yes, we're very happy to have you. Please tell us about yourself and your background.
Well, I'm Dee Lawrence. I'm founder and director of Cool Effect. Cool Effect is a digital platform where people can find high quality carbon offsets to reduce emissions that they can't reduce in any other way. And I'm also director of an organization called Proyecto Mirador, which is based in Honduras. It's a cook stove project. And I'll tell you a little bit about how the two are linked and why the two are linked. And so I'll just start by maybe telling you a little bit about how Cool Effect actually it grew out of a grassroots effort that we had to solve a health problem in Honduras. We noticed we joined a group of doctors as translators in 2002. And when we were down in Honduras, we noticed that a lot of women were coming in, and women and children both were coming in with respiratory illness. But there we were in the mountains. It was beautiful. The weather was clear. There was no air pollution. So why were these women and children so sick? And so we didn't really understand it. The doctors were treating it with nebulizers. They were treating it with asthma inhalers and all kinds of other things. It wasn't until a couple years later that our daughter was actually invited into someone's home, and they happened to be cooking their evening meal. And it turns out that they cook their food with a wood-burning cook stove that's indoors. And this thing is like cooking with your fireplace. It gives off a lot of smoke. And when you're standing over the stove cooking tortillas, you're breathing a lot of it.
Wow.
So there's a lot of particulate emissions, and smoke has a lot of, cancer-causing components as well. So this is the problem. So let's see if we can solve the root of the problem instead of putting a Band-Aid on it with health interventions. So we set out to find a better cook stove. So later that year, we actually found a great cook stove, and it had a chimney, so it vented all the toxic smoke out of the house. It was really efficient, so it also burned about half the amount of wood. And interestingly, when you burn about half the amount of wood, you emit half the amount of CO2. And this figures in the story a bit later. So then we began building these cook stoves, and we were getting donations from family and friends. And we were trying to build maybe 250 stoves a year, 500 stoves a year, maybe 2,500 stoves a year. And, it was a drop in the bucket because there's 500,000 homes in Central America that cook in the old traditional way with lots of smoke.
Wow.
So we were a bit frustrated by this. And at the same time, we noticed that the carbon markets were starting to heat up. So this was 2007, 2008, and there was a lot of talk about carbon trading. And we set out to see if Proyecto Mirador, that's the name of the cook stove project, could actually qualify for carbon credits. So it took us 2 years, and so by 2000, and it took us 2 years. So we applied to the gold standard, which was the only carbon offset program that offered a methodology for clean cook stoves. So by reducing the wood use, by reducing the fuel use, you can actually save emissions. Those can be counted, and they can be monitored, and they can be verified. And so they had a methodology to do that. So we were the 4th cook stove project in the world to become registered by the gold standard. So in 2009, our lives changed because we started issuing carbon credits. And we went from building 2,500 stoves a year to building 20,000 stoves a year because we were able able to sell our carbon credits to some really wonderful international organizations that believed in us and saw the potential of what we were doing, and how not only did we solve a health problem, we reduced fuel use, so we were saving forests. Families had to spend less time gathering wood, like about half the time. They also
Yeah.
had less, if they bought wood, they had savings that they could contribute to other things like buying food. So it's this fantastic, high-powered intervention. So
Amazing. Oh my God. It so makes me so emotional too. So where's the project at this stage? So it has been a
yeah,
few years now.
it's
Yeah.
been a few years since we started. We went down to Honduras in 2002. In 2004, we recognized the problem. In 2009, we were able to issue our first carbon credits, and
Wow.
and that just made a huge difference. It made a huge difference to women and children in Honduras, but it also made a huge difference to the project, because now we could really hire people, because we knew we had regular income coming in from the sale of carbon, and we could scale up. And so the whole thing was just great. So we love carbon projects, right? And but we knew that there were lots of other carbon projects out there that were suffering because they didn't have any buyers, and yet they were doing the same kind of good work. They were helping
Hmm.
women and children. They were saving forests. They were giving people an alternative source of income, and they were also either sequestering carbon or avoiding carbon. So let's talk about what is a carbon credit. A carbon credit
Yes.
actually compensates for emissions that are made elsewhere. So a carbon credit sequesters or avoids the emission of CO2 or another basket of gases that are greenhouse gas, that are global warming gases. And
Hmm.
so some people, in 2007, 2008, the system was gamed a bit, and we found that um, people were issuing carbon credits that shouldn't really have been issued for carbon. They
Mm.
weren't projects like Proyecto Mirador. They were trying to game the system and make a lot of money. So it was not exactly the way things should be. And so it suffered a bit, but good projects like ours have survived. And so Richard and I, my husband and I, we were sitting around one day. We said, look, if we can find, 5 people to buy carbon credits, maybe we could find 10. If we could find 10, could we find 100? Could we find 1,000? Could we find 10,000? And at the same time, this is when climate change was really hitting here in the U.S.
Yeah.
And people were talking, I want to do something about climate. I'm going to eat less meat. I'm going to take public transportation. I'm going to ride my
Yeah.
bike. I'm going to bring my bag. I'm going to do all these things. So we said, why wouldn't people want to buy carbon offsets and support these projects that are actually reducing carbon? Whether it has anything to do with their footprint or not, it's helping the planet, right? And if you say you want to help the planet, then you should do it.
Yeah.
So we decided that we needed to start a platform and promote the idea of carbon credits and change the dialogue to, what is a high quality carbon credit? A high quality carbon credit means that it's carbon credit that you would have reduced yourself if you had the wherewithal to do it. So you want to
Hmm.
find the best way you can do it, because otherwise you're just contributing. If you say, oh, I actually reduced that ton, then you're actually contributing more to the problem because that ton didn't really get reduced. So the idea is make it really good. Make it really good. So
Yeah.
um, now I was talking about Mirador. We use data to track our stoves. A lot of projects have other ways of monitoring and verification, but this is a really important piece of carbon credits. They have to be monitored, they have to be verified, and they have to be done regularly. And a project has to continue to issue credits in order for it to be considered for our Cool Effect platform. But we think we've done more to raise the profile of carbon credits in the last 5 years than anybody had really done before. We set out to really tell people what's a great project. So what are some of the great projects that we have? Well, we have a project, for example, where it's a tree planting project using small groups and teaching people how to manage small groups and how to be present in small groups and how to lead small groups, both women and men. And what they do
Hmm.
is they plant trees, and then each person has responsibility for their particular tree, and they collect data on handheld phones from like the 2000s, right? Early 2000 days.
Yeah.
So this is a great project. They have tons of data. They know where their trees are. They have people watching the trees, because one problem with trees is when you plant them, a lot of them die. And so the idea
Yeah.
is that you want to make sure that the tree is growing and it's actually sequestering carbon. At the same time, those trees are creating shade for plants. So in India, say in India now, the temperature in some areas, in some rural areas, is 120 degrees during the day. So crops are having a hard time surviving, but if they have shade, the temperature is normalized and they're able to, grow better. It also
Hmm.
provides fodder for animals, and some of these trees are actually fruit trees or nut trees. So it's food for families, or it's food that they can sell on the market. So that's an example of a really great carbon project. Another one is a peat swamp project in Indonesia, where people who live in the peat swamp, I mean, can you imagine living in a peat swamp?
No. No, no. Oh my God.
The snakes, the bugs, all those kinds of things. But they are fantastic. And what they do is they're trying to find alternative sources of income for people, so they don't have to cut the trees in the peat swamp. They don't have to move into a palm oil plantation where the trees are all completely destroyed, and they put in palm oil plantations and the animals are driven away. They're trying to live in a symbiotic fashion with the environment. Another problem with peat swamps is they have a lot of fires. So they teach people how to control the fires. So there's not the smoky environment that they're used to. There's another project in Brazil, for example, where land tenure is really tough. And so what they
Hmm.
set out to do was provide land tenure for families. They give them 100 acres that they have to, 200 acres that they would have to control. And they would save a good, 75% of that acreage for taking care of the trees, and then they'd use some for agriculture. But meanwhile, they're also teaching them alternative sources of income, such as beekeeping, that's not going to get to these remote areas. So that gives you the
Hmm.
flavor of what the projects are. To me, the heart of Cool Effect is really what the projects do and what they're doing for people.
So you pre-vet, basically making sure these are like legitimate projects that people would be actually contributing to the planet if they support it, right? If they
Yes.
buy credits. And so who are the buyers? Does it have to be corporates or any individual who thinks that they can actually contribute?
We have corporate buyers. Salesforce is one of our large buyers, and
Hmm.
every day we say God bless Salesforce, because they believe in this idea of reducing emissions. They've done so much internally to actually reduce their emissions prior to buying carbon offsets, and that's another part of the story which I kind of skipped. The idea is that carbon offsets, they're not a silver bullet at all. They are not the whole
Right.
story by any stretch of the imagination. They're a tiny piece.
Right.
We like to call it silver buckshot, right? And
Yeah.
so, so the idea is, as silver buckshot, it's just a tiny, tiny part. So it means that everybody has to do what they can first before they even consider buying a carbon credit. So Salesforce, for example, they buy all renewable energy for all their offices. They have grouped
Hmm.
their offices in a green way so that air conditioning and heating expenses are reduced. All their light switches are on, on-off lights. They have a power purchase agreement in place to buy renewable energy, which they've contracted for long in the future. They are an absolutely fantastic organization in terms of leadership in the climate area. So, that's part of the idea of carbon credits. You need to do everything else you can. So they're one of our really big buyers. But we have individuals buying from us. We have grandfathers who are buying credits to give to their grandkids for Christmas or for the holidays. We have medium-sized businesses. Some law firms, support us with offsetting their corporate travel or their meetings. People are trying to help, and
Yeah.
it's just been so gratifying to see Cool Effect. We sold about 800,000 tons in the first 4 years of the
Wow.
project, but in the last year we've sold 1 million. So the thing is really heating up. It's really we've been just excited to see.
It's probably a combination of both, right? Like your efforts to obviously get the word out there and educate people and make them aware of carbon credits, but also people, I mean, at least I'm hoping we are becoming more and more aware, and not only just say, oh, the government has to do something about it or the big corporates have to do something about it, but we take ownership as well. Like we're trying to do our best, right?
Oh, that's such a great point. We've done some research that would indicate that people are expecting, as you say, government to take leadership, and oh, it's not my fault, it's large companies' fault. Well, guess who bought from those large companies? It's all of us. It is
Exactly.
our problem. And for anybody who doesn't believe it's their personal responsibility, you really need to look at yourself twice in the mirror every day, because we cannot do this to our planet. We cannot do this to our planet. Our animal species are dying. Our birds are dying, and our beautiful and life-giving ocean is having terrible issues right now. So
Yeah.
every time you do something that you think is going to harm the planet, you really need to think twice about it. There's an organization called RARE, which we really like, and what they're doing is they're trying to put together. People keep asking, "What can I do for the planet?" And they're trying to put together
Hmm.
7 things that you can do for the planet that would help reduce emissions. And if those steps were taken by 10% of Americans, we could reduce 75% of the gap between what the Paris Accord has asked the United States to do and what we're actually
Wow.
going to be able to do. And they include,
10%?
yes,
That's insane.
just 10% of Americans. That's not very many of us, right? But the idea
No.
is that we want, that we have to eat less meat. We have to have less food waste. We need to take one less airplane trip. Okay, we have to see our families. We have to have a vacation. We have to get out of town. We do have to do those things. But let's think about it before we do it. And if we do it, we should compensate for it. We should think about buying an electric car. One of the things we have to do is we have to get off fossil fuels. And so
Yep.
here in Berkeley, for example, any new homes that are being built have to be totally electric. They can't have any gas. So all heating, all
Hmm.
stoves, everything is electric,
Amazing.
because electric has a supply of renewable energy. Gas does not, right? And gas, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know it, is a dirty fossil fuel. It is not clean, efficient gas. It is dirty fossil fuel called methane.
I feel like, I mean, I always find West Coast more future forward in terms of just environmental friendliness compared to East Coast, unfortunately. And it's even more so like evident in like Europe, right? Especially countries in like Netherlands or Belgium, who's like much more aware and active in contributing. So I want to share my like, you know, awareness moment, so that I also don't want like people, whenever you start it's okay, you just have to get started at it, right? Like I consider myself, environmentally friendly. I'm always responsible and like recycling. I try to eliminate plastic use. I'm obviously, I try to use public transportation as much as I can. So I thought of myself as a, environmentally conscious person, um minus the air travel. I didn't even like think, because in my mind, we live in US. I have meetings often in Europe, and ironically enough, we had a sustainability project in Utrecht, in Netherlands. So I would fly there 3, 4 times a year, and then I learned the term flight shaming actually when I was there, and like suddenly someone was like, "Well, I mean, you're here, but like you're traveling like 4 times a year. Like, what is the carbon footprint of that?" And I'm like, "Well, what is my alternative?"
But I'm doing good. I mean, so we get this a lot, from some of the environmental organizations. Many more environmental organizations, I have to be frank, don't like offsets. Some do, some don't. But this is one common refrain. Well, I'm doing so much for the planet. Why should I think about my carbon footprint? And it's like, are you kidding me? You know?
We have to think about everything. That's the whole point. And just
That's
because you're doing something good doesn't mean you can't do better. like it's, but then that was my realization of even the existence of credits. Like I didn't even know. And obviously, like I wish there was a, electric aviation alternative, right? Like we actually, one of our podcastees was Magni X that is working to do that until 2014, hopefully. So, I mean, I would have loved that. That would have been my travel option for sure, but it doesn't exist. So in my mind, I have no other option. So what can I do? But apparently you can do something even if it's not the silver bullet. So
You can compensate and you can know
yeah,
that you're doing good somewhere in the world. And you don't even have to think about it as compensating. If you like climate and you like climate change and you believe in what these people are doing to try and sequester or avoid emissions, you can support them regardless of what it has to do with your own responsibilities. But I do believe, I believe that we do have to get together. I think a lot of things happen when people talk to each other face to face, and good
for
ideas are
sure.
hatched and brilliant ideas are hatched and real action takes place. And I think it's really important. So I would never say stop flying, but if you're taking a flight all the way, all the way across the US because you're going to spend a weekend, at the beach, don't do that. Go find a beach near you, and if you can't find a beach, find a forest or a mountain, you know.
Exactly.
And so,
Yeah.
these are the things people need to think about. It's not like the good old days. We only have, last year we said we only have 12 Earth days left, okay, in order to try and really do what needs to be done. And now it's only 11. And so this is a serious, serious thing. I mean, I heard
Yeah.
it was, ocean-wide coral bleaching that took place that was completely unexpected and unpredicted. But this is because the ocean is warm, and
Hmm.
there's too much CO2 in the ocean, and the little animals that live there, they just can't survive. You know that I think a third of the bird species have gone extinct because a lot of habitat loss, that's part of it, but also because of changing climate. So they're forced to move into another area in order to live, and they're competing with others for food, so they may not be as successful. Or you have the Arctic tern where the ice has melted and it's retreated so much that where they used to be able to fly out and get a fish to feed their babies, they can't fly that far to get the fish, so they get a different kind of fish, and it's too bony for the babies and it kills them. I mean, there's
Oh
all these
my God.
stories that we are responsible for at the end of the day. And no, government is not going to take care of it. Government is so dysfunctional and so wrapped up in politics and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
We cannot wait. We cannot wait.
I
Um,
mean, I I don't want to say never because I don't know, but I have a feeling that policy always and have always been lagging, right? Like there are people who are leading the conversation, and then technology is like leading the conversation, let's say, and then policy sort of follows. I mean, there have been some great examples of policy and how like policy change could, lead the society forward, but in many cases is also lagging,
yeah.
and hence the reason why we're in things that are we're in today. But I'm really hoping, and obviously it's hard to find a silver lining in something so disastrous. And today we're seeing many people dying because of COVID-19, but we're also reading articles about, and not only reading articles, but seeing how nature is sort of like reappearing again in front of our eyes just because we're not out there polluting, right?
It's true, isn't it? I mean, the blue skies are amazing right now. They are. And you can
Crazy.
see further than you've ever been able to see before. And think about those people who live near those LA freeways with so few cars out there. Their air is so much cleaner. They're healthier. They're happier. I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's a real contrast.
And we're hearing more birds in New York City, right? Like there is, so this is happening now and we saw it and we cannot unsee it. So I'm hoping there is also a collective learning curve from this experience too, like seeing how we are the problem, right? And when we sort of step back, things start to heal on its own almost.
Mhm.
And I think that that is an opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity maybe, to like witness. So I really hope that also contributes to some like uh, awareness and action among us ourselves, and feeling that we could actually be more careful and mindful. And also, even if we are very environmentally conscious, like it wouldn't hurt to be in the carbon market, I think. Like, what a wonderful birthday gift. Like, what a wonderful anniversary gift. Like, we are already over consuming. How great it is to sort of try to give back to Earth.
Yeah,
Like,
and give something that doesn't have a footprint. I do think that, this kind of behavior change that's going along with COVID, we're going to have to be out there wearing masks. We're going to have to be out there thinking about going to the grocery store, thinking about others around us. And I do think that
mhm.
I'm very hopeful that people will also be thinking about climate at the same time, because the Earth also has a fever, and it's caused by us, right? And so so we
Oh,
actually
true.
need to do something. We need to do something about it. But I am very hopeful that, we just have to change the way we think about things. Just because you're wealthy and you have access to a lot of funds, doesn't
Mhm.
give you the right to pollute. It doesn't. You need to think about it as carefully as anybody else. And I loved, your saying about single-use plastics. If we're going to reduce fossil fuels, which is really one of the things we really have to do, plastics, the oil companies now, because they see that the demand is going down, because we have a lot more electric cars, governments are buying electric buses, the footprint is coming down. So
Yes.
they've now turned to creating plastics. So they're expecting growth in plastics to be about 50% more over the next 10 to 15 years. I mean, it's just,
That's
so that's where the oil is going to go, right? So the more we fight back and we don't buy those single-use plastics, the better off, we're all going to be. Um,
yeah,
but I'm also excited. People are really genius. They're really ingenious. So people are looking at all kinds of different ways to permanently reduce emissions. And this is a key point. Carbon offsets, they permanently reduce emissions, but
mhm.
but somebody else is doing it on your behalf. So it's really important that you do
Right.
it. And yes, obviously they can't do it unless they get money from you. So that's one of the hallmarks of a great carbon project. Financially, they can't survive and they can't reduce carbon unless you support the project. But we also need to permanently reduce things, and all those steps that you were talking about are so important.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So to go back to the beginning and to sort of like inform people on it too, let's say we're working on a great carbon project. How do we find you and apply? Like, how do we get into the system?
Oh, how do we get into cool effect? Yeah,
Yes.
just write to me. We're very picky.
Perfect.
We're very picky. But if you think you have a
Yeah.
good one and you need to promote your project, we would love to be able to help. We have a variety of projects. We like to keep a variety. So cook stoves are one kind of project. Forests are
Mhm.
another. We have biogas digesters. We have a methane capture program. We have grassland program. We try to keep a diversity of credits. We're just going to add a swine compost project
Oh,
where they're taking the poo, instead of pumping it into a lagoon where it just gives off a lot of methane, they're going to use it for fertilizer, which is fantastic.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's fantastic. But they can't survive unless they get the money from carbon credits in order to be able to help them put those systems in place. They're doing a lot, but they need a little bit of extra income from carbon to make it happen. So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Good to know. Okay. And so I guess to wrap up our conversation, if somebody would try to start a business to also, create carbon offset, or even like anything related to the environment, I guess, or any challenging issue really that we need to tackle today, what would be your advice?
Oh, I think, well, I think the idea is that this is a collective, what you said before, this is a collective responsibility. Don't be pointing your finger at somebody else. You make it happen, either, join Cool Effect, compensate for some of your emissions, help some of these projects around the world and here in the United States to actually reduce more emissions, and keep going and adding more land or finding new people to join their project. It's a collective responsibility, but also don't turn your back. You need to buy renewable energy. If it's available in your area, you make the switch. It's usually very easy. All you need is your electric bill. You call them up and you will just erase automatically like half your footprint, which is a fantastic way to do it. And you'll be helping promote the idea of renewables all over the country at the same time. If you're a big organization, you definitely should be demanding renewable energy, because we found that when Amazon, for example, went into Ohio, they demanded They demanded renewable energy. And guess what? Ohio gave them renewable energy. Big surprise, right? So in some of these areas that are reluctant to, follow the green path, you're a force, you're a voice. And write to your legislators, tell them how you feel about climate, that it's really important to you. And hopefully, if it'll become more of an issue in the upcoming years.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I think it is our responsibility to just like speak up and really be proactive. I mean, thinking and, pondering on our own about it, like, oh, everything is so bad, it's really not helping anyone. Like, we just need to do something about it. And I'm so glad you just said that. Like, write someone, demand something, just like speak up about it.
Yeah. And if you
I
think
think
your 5 tons don't matter, look at us. We have 1 million tons. A lot of them were 5-ton purchases. Some were 2,000-ton purchases, but people came together. So that's 1 million tons. That's a pretty good bite, right? It is. And 2 million since we started is also pretty good. And we hope to do another 1 million in the coming year. So,
well, we can't wait to support you in that too. And we hope the Honduras project, I'm now imagining all of the cook stoves being replaced. I'm really hoping to that day to happen. If you announce that, we will definitely celebrate. And also to Cool Effect to continue to grow so that we do make a collective global impact.
well, thank you so much for speaking with me. It's just
Thank-
really, it's a pleasure to have the interest. And I know you guys are doing your best too with buildings and design. And that's another whole COW can of worms.
Exactly. Exactly. And we also are an industry that really needs to be responsible and also think outside of the box and not just look at the industry norms or policy. We have to incorporate innovation and think differently too. So
And you're
we
doing it.
really appreciate interviews like this because of that. And thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. If you found value in these conversations, please like our video and hit the subscribe button. Make sure to visit our website, podcast.what'swrongwith.xyz, and subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts so you never miss an episode. Please leave us a comment or review, or you can simply tell your friends about us. For more details on our guests, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can find our handles in the description below. And don't forget to join us next week.